Now that we've ingested our first data, it's time to start working on the fun stuff, and that's the data engineering. So we've already got our first step in the pipeline, namely the ingestion, and from here on out we can start transforming it and providing outputs that are useful, for example, in a dashboard or for a business analyst. So to provide a bit of context, the pipeline, of course, is a series of transformations, and we use those different steps to increasingly refine data. So we've got our raw data ingested right over here. We can then create staging models that maybe clean up some data, drop some columns we don't need, etc. From there we can create intermediate models, which are useful for data engineering. So for example, two joins you use quite often together. And then we've got MART models. And MART models is what we expose to other people in the business, to dashboards, etc. So without much further ado, let's create our first staging model, and we'll be creating a model based on the orders table over here. So let's head over to the list view. As you can see, I moved this one to the sources directory, and likewise we can also create a models directory to group all models together. Now within models directory, we will also create a staging directory because we want to combine our staging models, and here is where we'll create a new model. So we'll be creating a SQL model, and we'll call this one staging underscore orders. Hit Command Enter to create this, and these are the columns we want to be ingesting. So let's take a look here and go to query, and here we can just write any query. I'll copy paste one that you can find in the Getting Started guide, and I'll quickly walk you through it. So we've got our source data that we select. We then rename some columns. So for example, ID becomes order ID and status becomes order status. And then we do our actual data transformation. So the order status in our source is always a 0, a 1, or a 2, but we want to transform that into cancelled, declined, or accepted. Now the only thing that may seem a bit odd is this part over here. So rather than point to the physical table in our data warehouse, we want to point to a reference within Y42. So we want to be sure that every time we run this model, it points to the associated source. So we point to our asset over here and then select the table in that asset. And here you can see the columns, we can view the metadata, we can preview some data, etc. And the reason we do this is under the hood, Y42 transforms this into the table, and we can see that over here. If we compile the query, then this is that query that will actually be executed. And of course, all these hashes are far too long for us to remember, so it's far nicer to just point this to the right asset within our space. Now, let's take a look. We can preview this query to see what the outcomes will be. There we go. So we've got our order ID, customer ID, etc., etc., and the order status over here will be changed to accepted as well. Now we're happy with these changes. We can take a look at the SQL. We can take a look at the YAML file that will be generated. So we can now commit this, transform, create staging orders, and commit that. Y42 will run some pre-configured checks to make sure everything is in order. Now if you go to the lineage view, you'll see that there's no materialization yet. So from here we can run a build to ensure that this table is also written to our data warehouse. Now this will take a few minutes. And there we go. After a little wait, this model is now also green because it has been materialized, and we can take a look at the data that now exists in our data warehouse. There we go. So from here on out, if we double click this, we can pull up this pane. We can take a look at columns. Now here Y42 will tell us that the documented columns don't match the latest materialization. So let's sync those. Nice. And then maybe let's also add some tests for this. So we transformed the order status column, of course. So from now on, we should be sure that the accepted values can be either cancelled or declined, or hopefully for most orders accepted. Let's save that. And if we take a look here, now we can see that the YAML file has changed because now the columns are also listed here. And we've got a column test for the order status. Sync columns and add test for order status. There we go. Let's commit that. There we go, compilation is successful. Now the staging orders model here will turn yellow again because it's still due to unbuilt changes. Why does that happen? Because we introduced a test and the tests haven't been executed yet. So this is of course what we added just now. If we now build it again, so select staging orders, Command Enter to execute, we can now trigger the orchestration and it will run the test based on the table that's already there. Actually, let me show real quick how you can double click here. It's queued now, and from here we can also navigate to the logs. So as soon as this picks up, Y42 will run the test and make sure that we find the data that we're expecting. And there we go. Status is now ready. Everything is green, just like we expected it to. Now I'll leave it as a bit of homework to create staging models for payments and customers as well.